The movie starts in New York and we hear the story of two souls lost looking if we go to the port. And inside an old building live two abandoned puppies playing with each other. They suddenly arrive workers from animal control and they begin to carry out the puppies, but we see that it was hidden a red puppy which runs to the exit but cannot get, so he gets stuck and gets lie down very sad. We return to the city and we are introduced to Emily, who is bothered by her companions. Emily arrives to her house and we find out that she is in a new school and that they bother her for not having money, something that her mother says to ignore them and that she must be brave. Later her mother tells her that she will go out for a couple of days and that she will stay with a babysitter. We go with Casey, which lives inside his vehicle and receives a violation because he did not pay the parking meter, but he just walks away running. We return to the port and see that the dog managed to get out of the building ditched while Casey reunites with a woman at an interview. I work, but she tells him that she arrived late, so he looks angry from the office. We return with Emily and finds collecting objects for her school fundraiser with the neighbors of him after Emily leaves the building to collect cans and bottles in other places, while we see the red puppy running through the streets and starts playing with some pigeons. But Mr. Bryce gets up and starts to take it Emily. He goes back to his house and we find out that Casey is her uncle and to take care of her. While he returns to his mom, we start to see that Uncle Casey is very careless and that he has lost Emily twice, so that she doesn't trust him to the day. Next they are on their way to school and Emily gets excited since there is a tent from Animal Rescue. Her uncle tells her that if they can go, so they go on way and we see that they have inside lots of different animals. Suddenly Mr. Bridwell appears and welcomes your rescue tent animal. He asks Emily what kind of animal searches, and Uncle Casey is surprised since the tent is bigger than it seems, and because they also have a baby giraffe after Mr. Bridwell. He leads them to where the red puppy, and Emily says that he wants to keep it to what the Lord Bridwell tells her that the pup will grow up depending on how much love the guy gives him. Casey tells him to return it because of which is very rare, and the gentleman gives it to him. Bridwell. We go to school and see that Emily is the only one with fundraising items, so they make fun of her again. Then Software approaches Emily and says that he also collected cans, but that his dad threw them the way classes start, and he breaks Emily's bag, so her classmates laugh and she begins to cry. Emily goes back to her house and starts to look for information about the tent, but she finds nothing. Suddenly she heard a noise and comes closer to see what it is, and we see that inside her backpack was the red puppy. Puts it on his bed and says he needs a name, by what he names him as Clifford. After Clifford gets out of bed and starts to bite everything he comes across because of that he is hungry. Emily takes away his slippers and Clifford takes the opportunity to leave the room and go to the kitchen. Casey notices Clifford and tells him to her niece that she did not give her permission to have the puppy, but she tells him that she only appeared in his backpack throughout that he marry, and tells him that she can stay alone the night and the next day will he return. Emily grabs Clifford and then she goes to her room and we see that her classmates made a video of her what happened during class. She is sad in milk and wishes that they are big and strong, and we see that she drops a Clifford deer while Bridwell is out of the apartment, and She leaves smiling from place to day. Next, Emily freaks out because Clifford got very big, so she thinks she's dreaming, but she realizes that everything is real. Clifford. She starts to play and breaks by accident her bed, then starts fighting a cushion, and we see that she also breaks it. Clifford keeps on moving on and on, destroying the stuff in the Emily room. She goes to her Uncle Casey's room and he tells her. He says she can keep it, but she must convince her mom that if she leaves the fourth, and she freaks out seeing Clifford already. That he thinks he is a monster, but Emily. She tells him that he just grew up all of a sudden. They get a call from his mom and she asks if he took her to school and replies that they are on their way later. Casey tells Clifford that he sits down, but he accidentally breaks on the table. He tells Emily that they are going to return him because she didn't know he had grown up. Both Mr. Packard knocks on the door and he says that he comes to fix the dishwasher. For what, Emilio hides Clifford inside. From his room, Casey opens the door and Mr. Packard asks what was what. It happened, and they tell him they did feng shui. Case opens the door and they realize that Clifford disappeared, but we see that he left the fourth Emmy and cannot hide before you turn it off. And he tells them that he needs a piece to fix the dishwasher, so he says that back to Emily starts to say that they should take him to a vet. He could be sick. Then they leave the home and off they go in search of a vet, so they put Clifford inside Casey's vehicle so that people can't see it. Suddenly arrives at Owen, who was on his way to take him to homework, but Clifford leaves the vehicle and the people are surprised seeing a giant red dog click form a ball rolling and starts running to the park to start playing with the sphere. After Glyph busts the sphere and he begins to take Emily, people gather around Clifford to take photos, but he is walking towards a tree to be able to pee, and we see that Casey drops us. We go to a company and see that the Mr. Tehran does experiments with animals. They do not happen as he expects, as they want create giant food. All of a sudden, woman shows him photos of him and Clifford. He says they must find him, while that at the vet everyone are surprised because Clifford the vet starts at review and says that even if he is a dog, Red Giant is in very good health and that he really doesn't know that he could have grown. We return to the company and Mr. Trent continues in search of Clifford to put a chip on it and make it of his property. After Mr. Trent, Emily's apartment leaves and question for letters near Clifford, while Clifford escapes from the vehicle and arrives at school with Emily. The girl who bothers her starts to say Clifford stuff so on my book defends, and then Clifford the licks, causing everyone to start laugh at her. They return to her apartment, but we realize that they were evicted because they cannot have a dog, and that we see that a person building is about to fall, but Clifford runs to help him and gets saved, so everyone they celebrate and thank him. Suddenly Mr. Tehran arrives and begins to say that Clifford is his dog and they offer him money to be able to take it. Emily is given realize that they are lying to them, that they throw orders that they put the chip, causing Clifford to leave running from the place, and that everyone they start chasing Uncle Keys and the neighbors start fighting. Men of the Lord pull, and we see that Emily starts to take Clifford inside the vehicle of his uncle and they manage to hide inside the building. When we go with Emily's mom and they report that her daughter did not go to school. While in the apartment, Casey gets a call from her mom, and Emily tells him that if she went to school, and that she was surely a mistake. Suddenly, Owen's dog starts reading to Clifford and he accidentally puts it inside his mouth, but then he spits it out. Mr. Tehran meets with a policeman and he starts to tell her that Clifford is his dog and that he must retrieve it because of that he has a mutation. We return to the apartment and everyone is eating hamburgers, but suddenly, listen to the news that is offering a reward of $25,000 for information about Clifford. We see Owen's father arrive and he notices Clifford, so he says that he will help them take him to his animal shelter for him to be safe. But he doesn't love Emily because he will ship far away the next day. They go to the community hospital in search of the Mr. Bridwell while Owen is. It stays next to Clifford, but he comes out vehicle due to Clifford being thrown a fart, causing people start dialing to get the reward. Emily and her uncle enter a room and they report that Mr. Bridwell passed away. But suddenly they hear a noise and realize that the police arrived at who get into the vehicle and start to go. It's getting dark and they're about to send to Clifford to the animal shelter of the dead, so Clifford gets sad and he tries to be small again after climb Clifford into the ship and they start going. The next day Mom Emily sees his daughter on the news while she and her uncle slept in the vehicle because they were evicted. Casey check his cell phone and we find out realize that actually Bridwell did not was the deceased. Suddenly comes to Owen and she tells them that Bridwell is alive and that he is in the park. We start to see on the news that the boat in where he was going to Clifford was arrested and that he goes back to the company. They pull by what everyone decides they owe help. We go to the company and see that Clifford is scared Emily and people begin to infiltrate and divide it into two groups. The first group begins to distract us while that others take advantage of to enter the building and try to free Clifford. Emily walks over to him and Clifford gets happy to see her again. Emily got on Clifford and they go on. I drive at high speed to the park. But they continue to be persecuted. While Casey tells the reporters that the company deceived them and that in reality the dog belonged to Emily. Clifford continues to run at great speed towards the park and manages to lose. The police manage to get to the park and meet again with the Lord Bridwell, which tells Emily that all Clifford needs is your love. Suddenly the police arrive and tell him that she has to speak for what Emily starts to tell them about Clifford, and not because it is different does a bad dog, but it does special, and we see that all people they begin to support her. The Lord arrives. They pull and say again that the dog is of his property, but the police tell everyone that he belongs to her. Emily, after Mr. Bridwell say fired because there are more people too which he must help, and meets with his mother and introduces him to Clifford to take a picture later all together. But Clifford sees again the spheres and begins to chase them. As a final scene we can see that they gave permission to have Clifford in the apartment and that Casey got a work and a place to live. We heard that the two lost souls they ended up finding a great family. This is how the movie ends. Don't forget subscribe and leave a like and comment what more movies you would like see in the channel. The greetings of this video are for Johan Guillermo Mauricio, Stephen and Daniel, and for Bryant. No forget to comment those who want to leave in the next video.